Okay, so what I had to do was I had to replace these wires because they're so thick. I didn't take into account the small opening of the pipe that holds up the ship on a stand, of course, because I'm an idiot and I didn't think to check the space. So I had to change the wires, and luckily Joe had some of the wires left over from the kit itself, the lighting kit, so I was able to use those. So I'm going to glue the rod into place, and when that's dry we can bring out the circuit board and I can put the final, let's see, it's going to be for the primary hull, and it'll be the final clip that'll go into the circuit board, and I'll permanently glue the primary saucer, primary hull, onto the secondary hull, and she's really going to start to take shape. Okay, so I got it hooked up temporarily, and I permanently affixed the clips into the circuit boards. You can see the primary hull is lit up, and knock on wood is going to function. When it's put into place and permanently glued, I super glued the rod into place into the bottom of the secondary hull. You can see the mess in there, but the lights still look good on the outside. The nacelle pylon is lit up, and the motors will spin from the base when that's hooked up to power. And now I just got to let the rod dry, and then I'll put the primary hull attached to the secondary hull, and I'll super glue it into place for permanently. Alright, let me give you a little bit of an update what I've been doing. So I put the primary hull and attached it to the secondary hull, and the post is super glued into place and it's dry. The primary hull is clipped into the PC board. You can see she's looking pretty beautiful. I just super glued the saucer pylon. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to let her dry, and I'm going to start working on the base. Okay, so when it comes to the base, I'm going to use the switch that he had been using. He had the Autocraft rocker switch, and it lights up when the power is on. So that's going to go in the base. Also, I got the two switches for the circuit boards to control the Bassard motor blades. So those are going to go in. So I'm going to come up with a pattern and see how they look best. I don't know if I'm going to put the switch in the middle and put the those on either side. I put them together and put the switch to the side. But either way, when the switches are in place and I'm ready to wire, I'll show you what that looks like. Alright, so I'm having another problem. See, the switch went in okay, but when it came to the circuit boards, I didn't take into account how large they were, and another miscalculation on my part. And as you can see, the base just won't accommodate. It's too big. And I tried angling it in, and it just wasn't right. So what I'm going to try to figure out is, I'm doing the refit right now, and I made a custom base. So I'm not going to be using the base for the refit. So I'm probably going to use the refit base from Space Stock, and I'll put the switches, well, the switch and the controls should fit fine in here. I'm just going to try to figure out how I can paint it to make it look like the original Star Trek. But I'm going to give it some primer, and I'll paint it black, and I'll show you what it looks like. The primer has had a chance to dry, and now I'm going to start putting on the coats of black, and I'll show you what that looks like after the first coat is dry. Okay, so I put a second coat on, and you can see it looks pretty good. So once that, I'm going to let that dry really, really well, and then we can work on the base. I'm going to think about ideas to decorate the base with. Okay, so when it comes to powering the base, these are going to be for the Bassard collectors. They're going to power the motors. The switch that Joe had is going to supply the main power with a lighted switch. And instead of using the white hacked up extension cord that he had, I'm going to use this, and I'm going to put this into the base. So it's all set to get everything to start to wire. So I'm going to get everything into place, and I'm probably going to wire the leads onto the switch. That way there, when I put them into the base, they'll be okay to just wire together. So that's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to show you what that looks like when that's done. Alright, so what I did was I temporarily put the switches and everything in place. I drilled the holes, and the base is going to be black. And I wasn't going to clear coat it, but I think I'm going to, because I made a plaque to put on, and you can see that I tried to make it look like it was metal. I did it on a computer, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it on the side, that way there. I'm going to be a little memorial plaque to him. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear coat the base, then I can put everything in permanently and then do the wiring from underneath. Okay, so I got everything in position, all the switches, the circuit boards, I got them in place underneath, and it fits a lot better in this base. So what we can do now is we can put the ship on top and run the wires through, and we can feed them and solder everything into place. Okay, so I fed the rod into the base, and all the wires are passed through, and I got the little power unit that's going to go for the plug. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the whole thing upside down, and I'm going to solder the base. Alright, so everything is potentially wired. I got it taped into place. I didn't solder it yet, just in case it doesn't work. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to flip it over, plug it in, and test it out. Alright, I'm almost done. I just flipped it over, did the base, the wiring, the light. When it goes on, well, when the switch is on, the light is on. You got the Bassard collector spinning. And I just got to solder the wires in the base. And a few more things and she'll be all set. So the base is all set now. All the wires are secure on the bottom, and the switches are all in place. And well, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to close up the secondary hull, and I'm going to put the deflector dish on. I'll show you what that looks like when that's done. Alright, so the deflector dish is in, and like when I did my other 1/350 scale Enterprise, I decided not to permanently glue it, only so if anything happens I can get back in and I can have access to the circuit board in the secondary hull anyway. So let's go ahead and I'll show you guys how she works. I'll plug in the, let me try to get it in there. And when the switch is on, The light goes on. You can see she's looking pretty good. The nacelle pylons are lit. There is a lot of light leak, but that's Joe's paint job, and I was not going to disturb that. I was going to leave it exactly the way he wanted. As a matter of fact, speaking about Joe, you can see right over here the room above where the 1300 is. I'm going to designate that as Joe's room. So those are Joe's quarters on the Enterprise. You can see the aft end. The lights that I had put in, that I had liked, the different sizes and shapes. You can see the observation deck, the saucer pylon, the impulse drive. I'll show you underneath the bridge, the sensor dome. So I think she came out pretty good. And let me show you the motors in the Bussard collectors. So we can start with the port. Well, that's actually the starboard. Okay, so this is the starboard side. And we can control the spin. And that's way too fast. We could bring it way down. That's too far down. Just a bit more. Nope, that's too much. So that's pretty good. And then we can do the port switch and try to bring it down and match them up. That's looking pretty good. So, like I said, when I had first started doing the nacelles, the Bussard collectors had to spin. And I know how discouraged Joe was when he wasn't able to get the motors to work and he didn't have new motors. So I really wanted to do that for him, and I wanted to make this model extra special in his memory. Matter of fact, I even did the plaque. I don't know if I can get a better angle of this one, but what I wanted to do was, I don't know if you can see that, you guys remember the Star Trek movies, the new ones, the Kelvin timeline. It was the plaque that they had found when they had found the USS Franklin. I kind of wanted it to look like that a little bit, like worn and weathered, but I didn't anticipate it getting so dark because being soaked with the the protectant, the clear sealant, kind of took its toll on it, but it's kind of glued into place with the sealant. So I put one on either side, and the plaque commemorates Joe, and it's built in his honor. And for the most part, that's his switch, and probably about 25% of the lighting kit I used. And I ended up probably 75% is stuff that I had either made or ordered special. You can see I think she looks good, and I love the color that he chose, the white, because this is what she looks like on a screen. I did mine in gray. It called for a certain shade of gray, and I went with the battleship gray because I liked the way it looked. And the white really looks good because my childhood memories has the Enterprise in white on a screen. So I think she looks wonderful. I like the color scheme. The only thing is there's a lot of light leaks, but I'm not about to change or mess with Joe's paint job. And I do like the fact that he put the inner nacelles blue, like the refit. I love that. I was going to do that on mine, but I went with the silver because that's what the instructions called for. You can see overall she looks really nice. And she's sturdy on the bigger base. And that just about concludes this build. So it's all set now. It's all put together. It's all wired. And I'm hoping that Joe likes it. I hope it's good, lives up to his standards. So here's the finished model. Joe's model is all finished. It's wired. The lights are in place. The motors. The base. I had to switch bases because in order to get the Bassard collectors to spin, I had to get motors and put new motors in. But I had to get regulators for the motors with circuit boards, and they were too big for the other base. So I got this base. You can see I got it wired. I got Joe's light switch. When you put it on, it lights up. The switches over here, the knobs control the speeds of the motors. You can see the Bassard collectors. The motor's spinning. You can see the inner parts of the nacelles. You can see the lights, the observation deck. Let's see all the lights working. The rear sensors are working. The impulse engines. So he painted all the parts. I didn't touch any of his paint job. But what I did do was there are certain things that he had in the wiring kit that wasn't working. And I ended up either using my own, making it, or ordering it, such as the motors and the circuit boards that control the speeds of the motors. But I hope he likes it.